Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Today we're going to be talking for 2 hours with Joey, USA Prepares instructor in Michigan. Joey in Michigan. And we're going to reminisce a little bit about what it was like growing up, what shaped us into who we are today. Family, events, encounters, things that we experienced, and the like. Welcome, Joey.
Hey, good morning, Vince. Good morning, class.
Good morning.
Going. 2 hours is going to go by fast, right?
Yeah, you know, I was talking with Jason, who's engineering today, about commercials. And I remember back in the very early 1950s that radio and TV had commercials. But they weren't about a third of the broadcast. There was a commercial at the top of the hour, and there was a commercial at the bottom of the hour. That was pretty much it. Do you remember that or not, Joe?
Absolutely. I mean, when you were a kid, you didn't want to see a commercial. And they were very, very, very seldom. But it's funny because what's different between a commercial and the show? What's both the commercial and the show? What are you learning from that?
Well, that's an interesting point because I've heard
being programmed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Joe, I just want to let you know that I'm looking at the screen, and we are experiencing a little over almost a second and a half delay on this broadcast. So it's going to be difficult to not step on each other. We're not trying to step on each other, class, but there is a really long delay. And I see a second and a half here in Missouri. So figure a second and a half, and Joey's probably got some delay on his side. So it might be a little over 2 seconds. And during the commercial break, I will see if I can fix that by reconnecting. But what we had was short commercials and content. And as I remember television shows and radio programming, it was not intended initially, at least in the 1950s, to confuse us. It was not. There were good guys and bad guys. So, for example, television shows would show a bad person committing a crime, for example, but it wasn't really a heinous crime. They didn't show blood and gore and guts and, sawing people apart. And you could tell the good from the bad. And always, 100% of the time, the good guys won in the end. And the bad guys, suffered the consequences of their crimes. That's what happened. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think bad guys get away with bad things. And good guys sometimes lose. And we didn't have perversion on the radio. We didn't have things like the Ellen DeGenerate show. We didn't have that. We didn't have people advocating perversion the way they do now. It was, if there was a show about good guys and bad guys, the good guys always won. Do you remember it that way?
I do. And I'm afraid the good guys, they're going to get a surprise this time. I'm afraid because the good guys apparently are too busy. They're too busy doing whatever they do, and they're not sticking together. I think they're going to get they're about to receive something they've never imagined. Mm-hmm. You feel that way, Vince? I
do. And it's not just in radio and television. It's in everything. And I'm finding that people are abandoning their values. I find that people are abandoning the relationships. And when I say relationships, I mean, guys who were friends, and abandoning, times have changed, and, I got to think about me first. I'm not going to think about, the commitments I've made over the, decade-long friendships. I'm seeing more and more of that. I'm seeing that, I've even called some of my boyfriends, back from the 60s. Friends that were boys that I've made long-term friendships with. I'm talking about, well over a decade. I can't even get in touch with them because they don't want to answer the phone. I've called their neighbors and said, hey, I'm trying to get in touch with so-and-so. He's your next door neighbor, and can you give him a message and give him my phone number and maybe he can call me? Even the neighbor won't call. I've never seen anything like it. If someone said to me, called me up and said, hey, your neighbor, Charlie, he and I used to grow up together. Can you give him a message for me and maybe have him call me? I'd say, well, sure, I'll give him the message. What's your number? Then I'd go over to Charlie and say, hey, Charlie, I got a call. I don't know if this is, bona fide or not, but this guy says here's his name, here's his phone number, hasn't talked to you in years, and he'd love to chat with you. Here's his number if you decide you'd like to call him. But those kinds of things aren't even happening now. It's really strange. There's no trust. There's no belief. There's no, the friendships are falling apart. I've never seen anything like this. And it's upsetting to me. Are you seeing that, Joe, or is it just happening over here?
I was talking to an old neighbor of mine yesterday. We got talking, and because he didn't get his mask on fast enough, a friend of his of 30 years chewed him out. Said, you're causing all kinds of problems. He says, slow down, calm down. I was in my truck. I'm just getting out. I mean, first of all, I really don't wear a diaper. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion of what's going on. A second wave's coming. But the television has helped done this. I mean, the television has programmed everybody. They're splitting them up. You're either a Republican or a Democrat. Then you can have conservatives and you can have extreme liberals. Then there's different colors of people. So the television is successfully, and really, how can you expect an outcome to be different when you're being programmed on a daily basis and you don't even know you're being programmed? Shows we grew up with, like the Andy Griffith Show, and just a basic, simple, where Aunt Bee was always baking cookies, and Opie had his friends over when he get a fish, and everybody was a happy. Today, everybody's angry. They didn't have the castle they were dreaming about. They didn't have anything that, in their mind, they thought they should have. I mean, you watch a lot of these old movies. As we were kids, what did they always talk about from the settlers when they were coming here to settle the country? They had something called an indentured servant, and everybody to learn a trade, it was like going to college. I mean, and even then, if you wanted to learn a trade, you had to grant X amount of time to the guy teaching you. You want to be a tinsmith? Beautiful. You want to be a blacksmith? Wonderful. You want to farm? This is what you have to learn. Today, everybody feels they have to have immediate gratification because the television says you should. The other day you were talking about people going to see the mouse, and that's fine. If they want to go see Mickey and Donald, that's wonderful. But also, when they spend that $8,000 or $10,000 on that vacation to enhance it, I mean, my dad, and I told you last week, when Disney World opened in Florida, my dad couldn't wait to take us there, because that was just something he wanted us to experience. But at the same token, that's changed so much. A trip that was $300 or $400 then is, $8,000 or $10,000, and all of a sudden you have to weigh out options. What do you want to learn? Do you want to learn about how to spend money, or do you want to learn how to conserve money? Do you want to learn how to save your money? I mean, I know how you think, Vince, because I kind of think the same way. Even though you and I can watch the same television show and both get different variables from it, and complete different perspectives of it. And it's not right or it's not wrong because those shows are run with frequencies. And what are the frequencies doing? They affect our brain patterns different. Is our brain pattern affected different because I eat more sugar than you do, or you eat more of this than I do? Is that what's altered brain frequencies? I mean, I'm no genius. I just throw stuff out there because, to me, if it comes up, it comes out. What do you think about that?
Well, I was thinking about what does it cost to, for they call them a pass to go to Disney. So, according to the internet, it is about $100 a day, to get through the turnstile at Disney. Now that's, without I don't know how much a hamburger costs, but people will borrow money to go there. Borrow money for an experience. I can understand borrowing money for a necessity, but I cannot understand borrowing money for an experience. I know someone who does not have a lot of money, has to pay for things over time, but yet went on a cruise. These things are foreign to me, and I don't think anything like that happened back in the 1950s. I don't believe people would borrow money for an experience back then. I never heard of it. Not with the people, my parents were neighbors with. None of that happened. Do you think there's anyone that you and your parents hung around with that would borrow money for an experience back in the 1950s?
Vince, I was born later than the 50s, but you're correct. My parents saved all year. When we were in school, we were one of 2 or 3 families that actually went on a Christmas vacation. And my parents were a little bit different. Not that we had all this extra money, but my parents saved different, just like your parents. And for my dad, that was very important for him to take us on an adventure. I mean, I talked to people 90 years old working at these resale shops. And I said, oh, no, I've never been to Florida. 90 years old. Yet the other guy's 90 years old. His family came here from the Netherlands, ended up in Iowa, went to Washington State, from Washington State back to Iowa, and then ended up here in this part of Michigan. And it's an incredible story, and they traveled in a station wagon. And his stories are just like, I want to pull up a log around a campfire and listen to him. He's talking about how when they were towing a trailer, they didn't have a ball hitch. They had a pin, and the pin fell out. They heard a crash. The father looks in the mirror, and he can't find the trailer. So they had to go back 3 miles to find the trailer. But you have to understand, a family of 9 was traveling in a station wagon. All their worldly goods were in the back of that trailer. That was no, 16-foot cargo trailer. Oh, no, it was a 4x8 trailer. And like you said, when we left, we auctioned everything off. When we got back, wherever we finally got established, the first thing the mom wanted after months and months of saving was to buy a washing machine just to simplify her life. So think about how all our values have changed from that story in the 30s to our stories of the 50s and 60s and now current nightmares. Get back on the break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, that washing machine, that was a big deal. And people didn't buy a new washing machine because it came out with a new color washing machine. We'll be right back. Joey's with us, and we're discussing what things were like back in the 50s and 60s when we were growing up. And Joe, a dishwasher in the kitchen was a big deal, having one of those back in the 1960s. And a washing machine was not, well, it was really nice to have, but it was becoming more commonplace. But people didn't buy washing machines because a new color came out. They bought a washing machine because they wanted it to work. They wanted it to be dependable, last a long time, and be effective at washing clothes. Today, that's not the case. People will buy a washing machine because they've been duped by the marketeers into thinking that this candy apple red front-loading washing machine that is a great idea. And it's a great idea to spend 3 times as much for it than one that has a top load. So marketing has changed the way people buy things because people are easily confused, easily duped, easily lied to, easily misled. But that's not the way it was back then. Commercials were really talking about durability back in the 1950s and usability. But then it changed. Probably around the probably the very late 60s, early 70s, fluff was, and style and ego took over in marketing, meaning instead of, you can do better than your neighbors. Don't let your neighbors get ahead of you. You need to have more stuff than your neighbors. And that's the way it was. Do you remember it that way?
Yeah, except for I don't use the word marketing. I use the word programming. And the people have been programmed. I mean, on what world would you live in that you could have this amount of rioting with the amount of destruction and damage to private and personal property? And I was listening to some human form of vomit. I believe that person is the mayor of Chicago, Lori LGBT Lightfoot. And you will never hear me speak about gays. I have gay friends, but that woman's a degenerate scumbag, like human feces. And she's listening to our alderman speak about the destruction, and she tells him to shut up. Now, what kind of an imbecile, subhuman moron would vote for a degenerate like that? And this, again, wasn't going to be political, but it always goes back to what you and I grew up with and how the distortion has gotten so widespread. People care about people, and everybody's life matters. Everybody's life matters. Animals matter. Everything matters. And, I get to a place and a point in my life, what are you going to prepare for? Are you going to prepare for living with Andy Griffith and Fonzie and Richie and Mommy and Daddy Cunningham? Is that who we're watching? Is that which time we're in? Or are we watching these new family videos where, the parents get a divorce, the guy marries a woman half his age with a different ethnic background, and their neighbors are gay, and they adopt them as the great-grandparents? I mean, because really, what's different between that scenario today and our friends, the Waltons, when Grandma and Grandma Walton actually were devout and strong gays, only they weren't promoted as gays. They were promoted as the most wholesome, happy family during the Depression, and they kept the glue. They were the glue that kept the family together. Now, what's different? They just changed the anomaly. So let's not use the word advertising. Let's use the word programming. Because how could you change so many people? One day you're wearing a mask for fear you're going to die of some, pandemic outbreak. The next day, there's thousands and thousands of people elbow to elbow burning and destroying cities. And I would like to propose a toast to all the media that put the inaccurate footage of the destruction, and each city that they didn't show actual burning, destruction, and looting, they should be handed the bill for the recovery. Don't ask the federal government to bail this mess out. And the federal government, if they had an ounce of a brain, which they don't, they would walk away and say, you guys burned it, you guys fix it. Now, you see how quick you and I start changing, or let me rephrase it, I start changing just based on a couple of words, because that's my programming and your programming. And it all started out so happy dealing with the 50s and the 60s. Go ahead.
You're absolutely right, Joe. And the President Donald Trump said, if you don't fix Seattle, he's going to do it. What does that mean? That sounds like a big hammer to me. We'll be right back. Joey's with us in Michigan. Joey, I looked up what it cost to go to see the mouse. In 2 years ago, 2018, for a family of four to spend a week, going to see the mouse. You're absolutely right. I believe you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, did you say $8,000 to $10,000?
That's right.
Okay. Well, it is $8,000 to $10,000. The cost that I researched is $8,800. That's right between $8,000 and $10,000. That's staggering to me.
Vince, you know how I know that number? Because I had friends that were bragging. That's what they spent. They were bragging. And I looked at them and I says, what's wrong with you people? You couldn't go for a day or two? You couldn't go for a day or two? You had to go for a week? Wow.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's some of the numbers that are extraordinary to me. And I must be way out of touch because I'm looking at the shopping list of, of these expenses. Airport parking, $140. Then there was the Wilderness Lodge, like $3,200. Park passes, that means to get into the park, $2,000, actually $2,044. In resort food, that means eating at the mouse, $1,800. How can a family of four spend $1,800 eating for a week? How is that possible? Face painting, to have your two children's faces painted, $30. So bottom line is $8,800. You are right on the money. So that's beyond crazy to me. Joe, I would have trouble spending $8,800 on a vehicle. As a matter of fact, $8,800, I could buy 10 vehicles. Literally 10 vehicles. I could buy 10 vehicles for $5,000. And they could all be Mercedes. No exaggeration. I'm sure you remember me telling you on the phone privately that, I bought a Mercedes for $525 and I bought another one for $700. I'm sure you remember things like that, right? Recently.
Yeah, right. And here's the icing on the cake. So how do you think we could ever go back to our childhood times when the people their imaginations have been stretched and reprocessed beyond comprehension? When our grandparents migrated here with a little bag, a little suitcase with all their worldly goods, they probably had $2 if they had that to their name. They came here and they started anew. Now, what family do you know that just spent $8,800? If they had everything taken away from them, they would have to get psychiatric counseling. They would lose their minds. They would go insane. They would be over the edge. What do you think's coming as the dollar is going to be reevaluated? Because our government, our people that we entrusted to help us, have put already $6 trillion of bonus money into this. And now, round two is coming. Round one, it seems to be everybody's sick. Nobody knows. They don't know how bad it is, but yet most people don't know anybody that's been sick yet. But round two's coming, and it's funny because all of South America has been hit by COVID. And some people still have what they call a brain. They could actually reason and think and rationalize. Let me think. And when you start destroying inner city stores, networks, you destroy people's integrity. Because there's a lot of people in the city that never wanted to see this. There's a lot of people depend on that for their groceries. There's a lot of people that depend on that network of, just like our network being out in the country, they have a different kind of a network in the city, and they go to their favorite mom and pop stores. And if anything else, the big stores, they get the super fun from Uncle Sam. But the mom and pops, like everybody in the mom and pop world, they get left out on the doorstep. And they're not going to have the money to rebuild. And most inner city stores tend to be immigrants. They moved there, just like when my grandparents came here. They lived in the city, the inner city, and as a progression occurred, they moved outward. What's the big deal? Nobody can see this. Everybody's so busy. Oh, my. We went back to the original question about why people of friends of 30 years ago you don't talk to. Well, like the one guy he's talking to, he seen a buddy of his 30 years ago, and the guy flipped out because he didn't have the mask on. But the difference is one is extremely liberal, one is extremely conservative. So now we've split that group. We got two halves. Let's keep splitting halves, because the more you can split a family up, the more you don't have family values. Just like I said, in the early 80s, our family started to go their separate ways. everybody start doing something different. But yet in the 70s and the late 60s, the families always stuck together. They always came together. When somebody needed help, there was help, whatever the help was. But, you know, help isn't giving somebody 10 grand to go on a vacation. Help isn't giving somebody 10 grand so they can go buy a car. Help might be, you know, what can I help you keep your house? And then how are you going to pay it back? But today, you can help all you want. And that's an expectation. And there is no intent of helping anybody and thinking you're going to get your money back. I don't care how small the money is. You help somebody and they think they did you a favor because you helped them. What kind of brain is that? You know, there I go being negative again, right?
Joe, so I was thinking back as you were talking about these things. I used to be a computer consultant, and I spent a lot of time in the public training camp, in the public school system. And I taught the teachers how to teach the children computer technology. And so many times I would sit in the back of the classroom and watch the teachers teaching. And what I noticed, now I'm talking about, you know, the 1990s and the early 2000s, I remember hearing words that I'd never heard when I was in public school. I'm talking about kindergarten through 12th grade in high school. I never heard a single teacher use the word shut up. Never. I never heard the teachers screaming shut up at the students. But I did in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. I heard that. I would hear, you don't even have to sit in the back of the classroom to hear it. You can walk down the hallway. When I was running for director of the school board position right here in Missouri, I was taking a tour unannounced of a high school, and I was walking down the hall, and I heard a teacher screaming, "Shut up. If you don't shut up, you're going to the principal's office." We never had that kind of language coming from adults in positions of responsibility like teachers in the 1950s and 1960s. Do you ever remember that, Joey? Teachers yelling and screaming at you?
They would have been sent home. Just like you have a mayor telling the president, and I don't know why they call Trump, but they call the last president Mr. President. Mr. President. That took our deficit from $4.5 trillion to 19-point-some trillion. And I'm not saying Big Donald did anything better, but the point of the story is, wow, we got a superhero. And, you know, none of this makes sense, but let's address the situation. When we grew up, black and white televisions, everything was analog. And as of in the 90s, everything started going digital. So a lot of today's children, they have to use a computer, and a computer is a digital item. So what is, you know, Rick Miller would speak about, somewhere in between John C. Lilly doing the dolphin and giving the dolphin languages, and that was the difference between the dolphin learned 37 words, and then we go on to the SEAL training, and then today they have a skull cap they put on because they map all the brain activities, so they know what frequencies activate what part of the brain. So we went completely from analog to digital, and it's much easier to program, and if you follow any of the nonsense on the internet about that great humanitarian, the human syphilis, Mr. Gates, he's promoting the new vaccines that will enable your DNA to be modified. I mean, I think that's just an incredible situation, especially if you don't mind not being what you were born. So once you start changing and screwing with DNA patterns, and you can electronically modify stuff, what kind of world is that going to be? If you think this world is strange, you know, that this world has just really started to accelerate in, the last 10 years? You know, maybe 15? But where we're at today, every day you wake up, it's another place we're living at. It's like fast forward with one of them discs with a Rolodex. Oh, that's right, that was analog, and digital is something different. So the point is, I don't have a clue And apparently nobody else does because they bury their head in the sand and they walk away and they put the mask on. Everybody I see, oh no, I just do not argue. Well, don't argue. When the truck comes, and Donald said he bought 500 million injections and he turned it over to the military, so I don't give a shit what he says. Who do you think's going to administer the shots? Are you interested in a shot? I mean, I break out. I get a rash from shots. And, I get a rash from a lot of things. But, I mean, at some point, you're going to beg somebody for a shot. I don't know what kind of shot. But what's going to happen? And I would have to ask the class, because a lot of the class, they're busy. I mean, they're busy thinking about, oh, my God, I lost my stocks. Oh, my portfolio. Oh, I'm not working. Oh, but, that's all another distraction. What's really coming? What's around the corner? I mean, how is it possible within 2 weeks, this virus supposedly ran around the globe? It's kind of left South America out. Now it's rampaging down there. But then how is it possible after 6 weeks into this, 5 weeks into this, oh my gosh, all the major food processing, Tyson, Purdue, Smithfield at the Chinese own, how is it possible? Everybody was sick there. And we gotta quit butchering food. How is that possible? And how is it possible that Tyson and Purdue are actively researching how to use bugs for protein? Because we don't really want to have animals anymore. How is it possible in Austria, as of last December, they start changing all the farming bills, and now you're grossly taxed if you harvest silage versus hay, because that silage is more for a cow, so you got a higher carbon tax to pay for a cow, and nobody even sees where it's going yet. How is this possible? Which world are we living in? I mean, do you live every day to your life's fullest today and not worry about what's coming? Because your kids, grandkids, future grandkids, they'll never, ever see the life we grew up in, and they won't see it because they've taken it all off of even a ridiculous old television show. So there you have it.
Yeah, and as you were saying these things, I was thinking about some occupations that have disappeared. For example, if you went to a barber shop to get a haircut back in the 1950s, you might see a shoe shine stand where men would have their shoes shined. We don't even shine shoes anymore. Joe, you're talking about, going to the mouse, and you're talking about the station wagon. And my parents owned a station wagon. My dad drove the sedan, and my mom drove the station wagon. And when we needed to buy something and bring it home, and if it was large, it went in the station wagon. When we went on a visit to family, we would take the station wagon. That was what happened, and life was centered around the family. And life was also different in that we didn't rent things. So, for example, if you needed a refrigerator, you would plan ahead and you'd say, you know what, I think we're going to need to buy a refrigerator. So let's save up for a couple of years until we can afford one, and then we'll get one. And today, we don't do that. We either borrow the money on a credit card to get a new shiny stainless steel appliance because we like the way it looks rather than need one. And we even rent them. There are stores all over our area in Missouri, rent to own, or rent a refrigerator, rent a washer, rent a sofa, rent a television. You can rent pretty much anything you want for your house. And that's so foreign to me because that never happened. There was never a discussion where my mom and dad said, you know what? We can rent a sofa. Why don't we do that? That would never happen in my house. Did that ever happen in your house, Joe?
You know what? We had money, not a lot of money. We weren't like these people that didn't know what all this money is, but, and we'd get a couch from my aunt. When my aunt would buy new couches, we'd get the old couch. And we'd have the old couch for 10 years before we get another couch. I was just thinking while you're saying that, a friend of mine, when my mom finally bought new couches, we gave him the old couches. He had them for 15 years. or ones that we had that were hand-me-down. And, people are funny that way. There's two kinds of people. The ones that need immediate gratification and those that just need to be content. And, it's like, I drive 20-year-old trucks. Why? Well, for two reasons. One is it's a fraction of the cost of a new one. The new one doesn't run because it's all electronic components, and eventually they will be obsolete. They will be obsolete. But eventually, guess what? I'm going to be obsolete. So really, it's not going to matter anymore. And the question I always bring up when I think about people, because everybody needs to have more. Give me a why. Whatever that means, you can interpret it any way you want. And especially the class, interpret it any way you want. But what do you really need? And when you wake up in the morning and you can get out of bed without any kind of hip pain, back pain, any kind of pain, and you feel good, you've already started off way ahead of most people. When you're fortunate enough that you don't partake in the pharmaceutical industry, I know there's people telling me they take up to 14 pills a day. 14 pills a day. Who benefits from that? In fact, the one person was telling me their mom's taking 14 pills a day. She didn't feel good for, my gosh, 30 years. She was out of town, down south on a vacation, got sick, went to a doctor, and he said, what are you taking all these pills for? I've been telling her. They cut half the pills out. She's never felt better in the last 30 years. See, she's been slow-killed poison by the medical media, as what would Norm call them, the medical mafia, and all they're doing is stretching out the money. Let's take more money. I mean, when do people, and I mean it's hard. It's hard when you're programmed, and I have to use that word, you're programmed, because who really knows what's going on? I don't know what's going on. I pay attention a lot better than most. How much of this is real? How much of this is a lie? And you can pretend you know. I don't know. Like I said, I'm one of the more simpler people you're going to meet. I didn't have all these pedigrees. I didn't get to work at all these government projects all these people brag about. I wasn't the Physician of the Year award. I'm just me. But I do have something a lot of people don't have. Good, rational, common sense. And I'm not right. As Rick would say, I don't know. Who's going to know? Well, I don't know. And I don't even make that statement because I don't know. If I knew, you think I'd be here? I told you the other day. If I knew what was going on, I would have cashed out all my stuff and went to a small, remote village in a third world country and let society collapse and let them feel how important they are. Because all these people, they're tearing down statues. Most of these morons tearing a statue down, they don't even know what 4th of July means. They didn't know there was an independence, and that's what 4th of July was about. They had, oh, really? And they're tearing down statues of Columbus? They're tearing down statues of all these people? And these governors should all be arrested, seize their personal properties, and use that money to resurface all these statues that are turned down. Or at least vote on it and see who's got the stones to say, no, we're not tearing this down. But no, we're living in one Demolition Man television show.
Joey's with us, and we're talking about growing up, what it was like and what's different. Quite a contrast. We'll be right back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. And I'd like to talk about, changing your air filter on your car. How that works and how it's different from 1950. You won't believe the difference, class. Joey's with us in Michigan, and we're talking about how times have changed, what it was like when we were younger and in the 1950s and 1960s and now. So, Joey, I mentioned air filters, and what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, it has to do with what people know how to do and what people don't know how to do. So back in the 1950s, most automobiles had what was called an oil bath air filter for the engine. And what would happen is this was a device, it was a canister that would allow air to go in the intake. The air would go straight down. There was a chamber that would bring the air straight down toward the ground. And then the air would have to do a rapid U-turn and go straight up. And what would happen is the velocity of the air would with these particles in it, contaminants, dust and dirt and so forth, the speed that the air would fly down this tube and then make the U-turn, the air could make the U-turn, but the dust couldn't. So right at the bottom where the U-turn was, there was a pan of oil. And flies and dust couldn't make the U-turn, and it would get trapped in the oil. And then after that, there was a screen that was bathed in oil, a metal screen. And that would remove any further contaminants. And just driving along, the oil would slosh around on this metal screen. Think of it like one of those pot scrubbers, those stainless steel pot scrubbers. It was like that kind of a screen. And it would be bathed in oil, and the air would have to wind its way around all those screen pieces. And the oil would get stuck, the dirt would get stuck to the oiled screens. And the screens would be washed as you drove down the road. And every, 30,000, 40,000 miles, you would open this canister, pour out the oil with the ants and the flies and the dust, and you'd wipe it out with a cloth, put some more engine oil in it, maybe a quarter of a quart or a half a quart, and you'd be good to go. But in the 1960s, around the mid-60s, that all changed. It was too hard. So we had what was called a disposable air cleaner for automobiles. You would loosen this wing nut under the hood, and you take out the old disposable paper element air filter, throw it away, pop on the new one. Same thing with the engine oil filters. They used to be cartridges. And what you would do is you would take a wrench and you would unbolt this long bolt. You would take off this heavy metal housing, and out would come the cartridge, the element that would filter the oil. You'd wipe out the housing with a clean cloth. You'd put the new cartridge element in. You put the gasket in. You tighten it up, and you were done. But that was too hard. Now, right after the 1950s, during the 1960s, we had spin-on oil filters. They had a thin metal housing. You would spin them on with your hand or a wrench, and you'd spin them off, and you'd throw them away. So we would be throwing away a lot more material because of this convenience. And that's what happened. Now, how does that relate to today? Well, we don't even know how to tie our shoes. What do I mean? Well, when I was growing up, my shoes were made of leather. Literally. And they had shoelaces. And I would tie my shoes. And every once in a while they'd get untied and I'd have to retie them. Well, today we have shoes that are not made out of leather. They're made in China or some Asian country. And some of them have what looks like laces. So you can, let your friends think that you know how to tie your shoes. But they're actually a stretch elastic that appear to be laces, but there's nothing to tie. They're already pre-tied for you, and all you have to do is remember to slip them on. That's all you have to do. That's how lazy we have become. We can't even tie our own shoes, Joe.
Vince, I don't believe it's anything to do with lazy. I think it's built-in obsolescence. Think of a leather shoe. When you wear a leather shoe, your body is grounded out because your body is an electrical component. And when you're wearing leather, the leather will allow your feet to ground out. But when you wear a rubber-soled shoe, which 90% of all shoes, 99% of all shoes are, and that's why you don't need to have your shoe shined. Because, when you buy a $200 pair of basketball shoes, or whatever you'd like to call them, it'd be embarrassing when they're bright red or pink and you have to have them shoe shined. But think about everything that's done for you in this current world. Is it done to help you? Is it done to dumb you down? I mean, we should ask these. I mean, how did they build the country we live in without computers? They did it with common sense, knowledge, slide rules. Every milling machine, locomotive, everything that was built was done with a piece of paper, a stick, and a ruler. All of a sudden, we're living in the most modern time of the universe, at least that we're aware of. We have the best of everything. We can 3D print stuff. I mean, we can do everything, and yet we can't do anything. What's wrong with that story? What's the difference between when we were building everything analog and now we have a digital world, and it seems that we have no quality of life. We have the illusion we have everything, but we have no quality of life because we don't have family. I'm just listening to the advertisement, the news, and they're going to let some people go see their family members in a nursing home for 3 months? What kind of mental anguish did they put on that person? And is it really for that person in the nursing home's best health issue? You know, I will give you a challenge. And the challenge is, as how do we want to put this? As the economy falters more and more because the value of money is becoming getting closer to worthless, I will encourage you to look at, as the dollar loses value and the money system starts to collapse, you will notice that Mona Corona will be more out of control. Because the virus will increase to scare you back into your house, because how many shelves are more and more empty because China is not selling us products, because China, as of last August in the trade deal, they don't want U.S. dollars anymore. They don't want, I mean, that's like going to your printer and printing out some more Monopoly money. Hey, I want to buy groceries here. Let me use this. Yeah, this is the guy with the top hat and the mustache. Yeah, it says Monopoly. No, it's okay. I said it's okay. What's different of printing your own money and having a bunch of degenerates that supposedly represent you printing money? How does that work? And at what point, when you go to the store to buy whatever it is you'd like to buy, it's not there? Have you seen what a canning jar costs lately? They went up 30 to 40%. Just in the last...
I was thinking 2x. I thought they doubled. At least around here they doubled. If you can get them. Canning lids, same thing. And to make sure that you can't can economically, spaghetti sauce used to come in jars that, not everybody recommended you use them again, but you could use...
Right.
What?
Glass.
Right, glass. Now it's new and improved. Lightweight, easy to carry. Won't break when you drop it. Plastic. But you can't use them for canning. You can't. But spaghetti sauce that you'd buy for 99 cents, 88 cents, 89 cents, that used to come in jars that even had graduations marked on the side of the jars so that you could reuse them. Heavier glass. Not anymore. Not anymore.
So,
it's harder and harder to find them.
Let me ask you the question. If everybody's so simple and ignorant and doesn't know what's going on, somebody's got their finger, whether Sambo shut down the importation of the glass jars, or people are buying them up because they're anticipating what's coming. Because there's a lot of people out there that just act like Melvin Milk Toast, dum dum dum, and they don't get all riled up, and they don't say stuff like I do, but they're secretly buying all kinds of stuff for that rainy day. And I mean, you gotta love it. You gotta love it when people are preparing for something. I noticed one thing this summer, or this spring. I've seen more yards churned up for gardens than any time in the last 25 years. I've seen yards that I've never seen gardens in, and yards I'd pay attention to. They got a great, they're twice the size. So what does that mean? And while they're busy leading the, what do we want to call it? The sheep to slaughter, everybody else is planning. And, you shouldn't be mad. I look at it this way. You want to buy a new car? You want to buy nice new, whatever it is you want to buy. I don't say you shouldn't buy it, but if times get tough and you overspent on useless, overpriced items, why would you think I should help you? That's the only question I would ask. Why do you think I should help you? Because, I have all I can do to help myself, and I don't mind, and you know better than anybody. I will always go out on a limb to help somebody if they appreciate the help, number one, and they try to help themselves. But if you're simple and you don't want to help yourself, why do I want to help you? That's a pretty simple question, isn't it?
Well, you and I both feel the same way about that. I used to help people multiple times. I would, tell them once and they wouldn't get it. So I tell them again, they wouldn't get it. Tell them again, many, many times. Now I tell them once. And if they don't get it, I don't have time. I don't have time to coddle them. I don't have time retrain them and re-educate them because they don't want to hear it. And some people even get mad at you when you try to help them. How about this? How big of a television do you think is necessary for a person to have? Now, I don't think the Finelli family has watched TV since the 1990s. So I'm thinking, 30 plus years that we have not had over-the-air programming. Now, we do have a television, and we do have it connected not to the internet, not to the local area network that we have in our home, not to Wi-Fi. It's just connected with an Ethernet cable, HDMI cable from the Blu-ray player or the DVD player to the television. That's it. So we're not connected to the world in terms of over-the-air television. And it works fine. But how many people have, televisions all over the house? Let me give you an example. So in, let's say, the living room, someone's watching TV. And in each of the bedrooms, other people are watching TV, different programs. What happened to watching TV as a family? Like back in the 1950s, the family would sit around the TV. Not their own TV. The TV. And typically, it was black and white. And not until the 1960s, 70s did color TV become somewhat more popular. Okay? But the whole family would wait in anticipation for that one program that they really love. They'd wait all week for that. And they had to watch it when it was on. They couldn't shift time. There were no recorders to record it and watch it later. If you wanted to watch it, you had to be ready to watch it when it was airing. Period. No on-demand television. We'll be right back. Joe, you're talking about shoes and grounding. I believe that's what you were talking about. And if you think about it, class, if you have leather shoes and if you have leather soles and your feet perspire in those leather shoes, there is moisture that travels through the leather, from your feet through the leather, including the soles. And so there is a grounding effect that happens with leather soles. It does not happen with rubber or plastic sneakers because rubber and plastic are insulators to prevent the grounding. And so if you think about what happened, we stopped repairing shoes. You used to be able to have a leather pair of shoes, and I remember they were about $17.50 for a pair of leather shoes when I was growing up, complete with, laces. And they had rubber heels so you wouldn't slip and fall. And they were repairable. And we would take the shoes to the shoe repair place, and for about $7.50, you could get new soles that would double the life and heels of the shoes. And that's what people did. And they actually bought little tins of shoe polish, and they would apply shoe polish wax to the shoes, and they would polish them because they would last longer if you polished them. And that's what people did. Once a week, people would polish their shoes. That was just something we did because it made them last longer. And if you look at the pictures of the first Great Depression, you will see men with suits on lined up for, a free meal. They would be wearing their best clothing to get that free meal. Now, in the good old days, I'm talking a few months ago, you would see people in their pajamas on airplanes. You'd see them in their pajamas at the Chinese factory outlet. You would see them in their pajamas in their front lawn. That's something you never saw. Never saw that in the 1950s and the 1960s. No one wore pajamas to a restaurant. It was considered gauche, offensive, wrong, impolite, garish, unacceptable back in the 1950s and 1960s. Joe, do you agree with that?
Vince, those people don't even wash when they come out in their bed linen. They probably haven't washed in 2 or 3 days because they're embarrassed. I guess they're afraid of water. you go back to your television show the family would watch on a Sunday night. My favorite childhood show was Walt Disney. Came on at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock our time, because it was an hour different. But anyway, they were the old Disney movies of the late, middle, early 50s. And the 70s, that all changed, as did the programming. But now let's go. We had ABC, NBC, CBS. We had 3 major television networks. A few bigger cities had a little satellites. But today there's like 700 different television shows. You can buy an internet system, a satellite system, and you can have 700 shows. Now, why would you give people that can't take care of themselves 700 alternative choices unless you're distracting them? And, I always watch, and they've taken most of his videos down, Richie from Boston, but Richie had, I'm not saying he's Bible, but he had some wonderful information about a television, the patents, and what the purpose was. And he calls it the Black Mirror. And, think about the television up until a certain time had a radius, rounded front, and now it's all flat screen. And I know Cliff High, he'll talk about an accelerated learning program. He can scan a book into a program, watch it on a old monitor, and digest as fast as the pages go by. He can digest all that reading. But you can't use a flat screen monitor, an LED. So what is the difference, and what is the reasoning to give you 700 choices unless you're modifying your perception of reality? I mean, because why do you watch? I mean, when I have a rough day, I like to watch something that makes me laugh, or something, blah, blah, blah. I like certain, series. I love The Black Sails, a little history on how important pirates were. This other show called The Outlander, a little bit of time travel. Those are the kind of things I like. I like to distance myself from reality periodically. We'll get back after your break.
All right. We'll be right back. Joey's with us in Michigan. Joey's with us, and we're talking about growing up in the 1950s and the 1960s, and how life is a little different. Actually, it's dramatically different. And Joey, what was the number that you said in terms of television channels? How many offerings are there?
700.
700 television channels.
Why would you need that many? And let's throw this into the loop. One thing you probably I know I liked in school, is history. And history is not really being taught today. And if people knew more history, they would understand what takes place. If people were taught about the Bolshevik Revolution, and they've seen how wonderful those people had it, all these cream puffs that are out marching, whether it's this or that, when they realized, or they studied about Mao and what a great humanitarian Mao was, and what he did for China, and how he abused the people in Tibet, if people seen what really took place, how people lost not just their life, but their dignity, they lost their families. One thing about these systems, you have to destroy the family value in order to create the next change. And as a country, we have no family values. The only family values I'm aware of are some old school families and a lot of the, immigrants, I guess would be a word for them. The people that came, and I always say the Mexican people seem to stick very much together. I see the Chinese are pretty good at that. Other backgrounds. But the people that live here, they abuse themselves the most. They have no family values left. Because after you get through the first generation, as we talked about last week, it was the grandparents, because they were here first, and their children stuck together, but then their children's children, and as the grandparents leave, the parents leave, it's a free-for-all. So what is it that people lack with history education? And if they knew how history repeats itself, and when you're taught false history, then how could you even have a potential curve to see what's coming. Can you imagine what's coming based on the little bit of history you and I know?
You know, so good quality programming is diluted by all the other programming. Currently, there are actually over 1 million podcasts running. 1 million. Think about that. So to try to find the ones that you're interested in are really, really difficult because they're currently over 1 million. And there's over 30 million episodes of podcasts that have happened as of April this year. That's an enormous amount of podcasts, enormous amount of choices. How can you even figure out what to do in terms of pay attention to them? And what does it do? Well, it dilutes the good ones because of all the lousy ones that are out there. I even get emails to look at this. This is worth looking at, and it's silly stuff, waste of time. You know, the equivalent of cartoons. I don't get it, and people love it. They love it, and I'm wondering if these are the people who can't tie their shoes. Robert in Kansas, welcome. You're on with Joey.
Good morning, Vincent. Thank you for taking my call, and I hope you keep having Joey on. It's good information. I want to say, Joey, we have been infiltrated, subverted this country, and you're so right about what you're saying. The main way that they do it, I think, is that they give women rights, the role of men, and then they program them to destroy the families through things like abortion and divorce and things like that. When you look up those statistics, you know, women account for 80% of initiation of divorce. And in a lot of ways, you guys are talking about programming, but you haven't mentioned school yet. Well, I guess Joey mentioned history, but he said fake history. That's true. But in school, you're taught, you know, men are evil. You're taught that whites are evil. You're taught that Christians are evil. And so for me, anyway, as a millennial, that's where I was first introduced to these ideas. And then, of course, you know, the evolution, and Vince, we could talk about the moon landings, right? We're taught that we landed on the moon. And so it is this thing where you have all this programming that leads you in these directions, and it is debasing the nation, and that foundation is the family, like Joey was saying. Absolutely. So really appreciate that, Joey.
Robert, you were right, by the way. I was Mr. Walmart, kicked out by a subhuman, a mentally challenged assistant manager. He really wasn't fit to use a broom in a restroom. Then I had contact with the store manager, which was another rectal thermometer inserter. I think he checked the thermometer after it was removed from the rectum. And finally, after 3 weeks, getting a district manager that said, yeah, you should never have had that. And then they sent me $200 back, because that's about what I spent there that day. But you were correct. You hit it right on the head. And I never brought that out, and I'm glad you called in, because, you know, people need to wake up. They need to stand up for what little bit they have left, because real soon, as this society breaks down, what's going to be left? The only thing you're going to have left is what you said and how you stand by it. And you can't trust people today, and they have every luxury they've ever wanted. How are you going to trust them later?
Yeah, when they get desperate, Joey, they turn into different people, right? People don't understand that, especially Americans, what it is like to be hungry if you haven't eaten for a while. And the psychology of people totally changes, right? So people have no idea what that could actually look like. If people, these riots right now, right, they have everything they could want. If they actually were hungry, think about, you know, people don't have anything to lose, right? So it's could be real bad. Yes, sir.
What we're saying is that when people were hungry back in the first Great Depression, they were polite. And now they have everything they could possibly want, and they're not polite. Is that what you're saying? I think that is.
Yeah, Vincent, they've taken things out of our society where if I was, let's say me and you as men, we were meeting together and I was rude to you. Let's say I was rude for undue reason. I had no reason to be. There would be, possibly a consequence right then and there. Potentially a violent interaction if I wasn't being an honorable person towards you as another man, if you were being honorable towards me, right? They've taken that, they've made it illegal, basically, for anyone to enforce any sort of level of conduct where if you were to get, let's say, even aggressive with me, I could call the police on you and say, oh, he threatened me or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're the bad guy when you're trying to enforce a standard of decency among men where that's all gone out the window now, where no, it's illegal now for you to even conduct yourself with honor, saying if you cheat me, I'll stab you in the eye with an ice pick. That's how it used to be back whenever we were cavemen. If you cheated somebody out of, let's say, some food or something, and if you weren't honorable, it was backed up with an extreme amount of violence. And they've taken that all out of society, and they've made it illegal to be a man, essentially, is what they've done.
Well, they want you to be a trans.
In the public school system, principals used to have a paddle in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so the principals, if someone were out of line, the principal would paddle that student. And of course, that can't happen anymore, right? I remember being in fourth grade class, and the teacher would say, who knows the answer to the question? And the hands would go up, meaning all the people in the class, all the students in that fourth grade class who thought they knew the answer would raise their hand, and the teacher would pick, one person and the next person and the next person and try to make it fair so everybody had a chance. But no one shouted out the answer. No one put their heads down to avoid not having the answer. But what I saw when I was a public school teacher as a traveling consultant, I saw students and I would ask the questions. I'd prepare all weekend for a great Monday lesson. At least I thought it was great. And I would deliver it like Columbo. And I remember students say, I would call on one particular student at a time, and the students would say, Mr. Finelli, you're picking on me because I'm black. And I'd say, no, I'm picking on you because it's your turn to answer the question.
Vincent, you didn't call on him, right?
Hang on.
That'd be racist too.
Well, okay, you're absolutely right. And so here's what happened. So I went to the principal and I said, what would you like me to do? I'm trying to teach a class, and here's what's happening. And the response I got was, whatever you do, don't make the newspaper. That was the answer. So it became very difficult to teach classes because no matter what you do, you're wrong. As you said, if I didn't pick on a child because he was black, it'd be because I'm racist. If I did pick on him, it's because I'm racist. But what I tried to do is make sure everybody was engaged. And by calling on a student to ask him if he knew the answer, that would help him remember that maybe next time it'd be a little better if he knew the answer. It'd be a little less embarrassing. But we've got a lot of problems in society, and it's going to take a long time to fix them because it took a long time getting here. This did not happen overnight. And frankly, I just want to make sure that everyone understands. My objective was to make sure that the students learned, and I would do everything I could to make sure that they did learn, including asking for the participation of the students, one at a time, sometimes many at a time. But it's extremely difficult because the same principal that said, Vinny, don't make the paper, said to me that he had a parent of a girl, high school student, wear very provocative clothing. And he wanted the parents to come in and say, look, we can't do this. You can't let your daughter wear stuff like this in school. And the response from the parents, look, from 8 to 3, she's all yours. You figure it out. Meaning the parents said, hey, principal, you figure it out. It's your problem. You know, if she wants to flash her underwear, that's the principal's problem. It's a really messed up world. It's going to be really tough to fix. Robert, did you want to hold through the break?
I have one more question for Joey. Yes, Ben.
All right, hold through the break, please. And Joey and I will be right back with Robert. Joey's with us. Robert's with us. Robert, you had another question for Joey?
I did, Vincent, and I hope you don't have to hang up on me. But I got Joey's attention when I made a comment on your program about the coronavirus there being maybe not as real as it is being announced. And I was curious, Joey, if you still.
Well, that's not what you said. Hold it, Robert, hold it. That's not quite accurate. What you said was it's fake. That's what you said.
In a one-dimensional phrase, okay. Yes, sir. I did.
And Robert, okay, I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure we're accurate.
Okay, Vince. I didn't know if Joey still his thoughts on it now in terms of just with everything going on, and also there was a document leaked from the German Ministry of Health, I believe, or German Ministry of Interior, something like that, and it basically was saying that. The corona thing is just completely overblown. Not, we should have done none of this. It just is completely not even worth it. I didn't know if he had heard about that. And, just with everything too, like the riots being okay. Like they're like, oh yeah, we need to riot, but coronavirus is still serious. Like it's becoming kind of a joke in my mind, but I didn't know, what Joey thought about it.
Robert, I agree with you 90%. There is a virus, though. Is it as bad as they say? I don't believe that. I believe the virus is correlating to the economic meltdown of this country. That's my belief. Because you have to keep people away from each other. I also believe to keep people 6 feet apart, that changes people's polarity and energy fields. And they always tell you in groups of 3, you can talk to your creator and create stuff. Well, there's obviously an issue, and I still question, how does a virus travel around the world in 2 weeks? It's been living in China for 2 months, but in 2 weeks, it went all over. Just like Black Lives Matter. They got Black Lives Matter marching in Austria and Germany right now. Wow, isn't that amazing? Mexico? How could you not believe this is an orchestrated event? This obviously, there's a
Joey,
lot more. I'm not that smart. Go ahead, Vince.
Well, yeah, I think you are that smart. Airplanes. We said in the very early days that air travel is the high-speed transmitter of this virus. And that's what it was. It came here from people who traveled on airplanes. It's as simple as that.
Oh, so Vince, when they're going to let...
And, if you think about it...
When they're going to let
When you think about it, what has really...
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we've got a delay of over 2 seconds, probably close to 3 now. When you think about it, what has really damaged our planet is higher and higher and higher speeds. So, for example, it used to take a ship to travel from Europe to the United States. Then it was an airplane. And with Bill Gates and faster and faster and faster, you're talking about slide rules, I believe. You're talking about paper, pencil, and slide rules. We used to do some great things. We didn't make as many mistakes because we were more careful with what we did. Now that we have computers to do things faster, we can make mistakes faster. With airplanes, we can communicate diseases faster. With all the social things that we do, like taking trips to see the mouse in high concentrations of people. we can spread disease faster. So if you think about it, Bill Gates and his like, or his ilk, have made computer technology ubiquitous, and so everything is faster. But it's not necessarily better. It's just faster. And so everything we do, positive and negative, is done faster and less deliberately. And
so
I think
let that,
in my world, appliances,
for the show's over.
appliance.
So these genetically modified mosquitoes they're about to release in Texas and Florida and North Carolina, how do you think that's going to factor into the Republican primary garbage, whatever, that they wanted in North Carolina, and the governor hasn't shut the state down? So now they're going to let them loose in Florida, Texas, because it was going to be in Florida or Texas. And now, and what would you need a genetically modified mosquito released for by the military? I'm just curious. In which world would that make sense?
Oh, it doesn't make sense at all, because every time we've genetically modified things, it's gotten worse, right? Genetically modified foods. You know, people didn't have these wheat bellies that they had before we started using insecticides and genetically modified seeds. We are poisoning ourselves. So in my world, genetically modifying, altering nature is a really bad thing to do. And yet we're doing it. And now, do you know that they're going to spray sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere to reflect the sun? Sulfur dioxide. It's a poison. It causes respiratory distress. It causes heart attacks. And yet, it looks like it's going to be approved by the government to spray the planet with sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. These kinds of things have to stop. Robert in Kansas, thanks so much for being with us. Joey, thank you for being